After a surprisingly civil debate, the GOP candidates are now focusing on the big winner-take-all states, Florida and Ohio. Will Donald Trump deliver the knockout blow come Tuesday? And then we're going to speak to a woman who knows Trump and worked with Trump. She tells us the good, the bad, and the ugly about the Donald. And on the day she's laid to rest, we look at the life and legacy of Nancy Reagan. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in once again for Richard French. 5 states head to the polls on Tuesday, and the biggest prizes are the winner-take-all states of Florida and Ohio. If Trump wins both, it is essentially game over. But Marco Rubio is trying an unusual strategy to try and stop it.
That home stretch to what's being dubbed Super Tuesday 3. GOP frontrunner Donald Trump started the morning with an endorsement from Dr. Ben Carson, a former rival Trump once called a psychopath.
We buried the hatchet. That was political stuff.
The political stuff has led to a change in strategy for Marco Rubio, who is now urging his supporters to vote for John Kasich in Ohio.
If a voter in Ohio is motivated by stopping Donald Trump and comes to the conclusion that John Kasich is the only one who can beat him there, then I expect that's the decision they'll make.
As for that tame GOP debate, no nasty name-calling, no excessive personal attacks, just the issues.
The answer is not simply to yell, China bad, Muslims bad.
We clearly have to control our borders. We can't have people just walking in.
There is so much to get to on this topic. Let's get right to our panel. Scott Vanderhoff is with us. He is a former 5-term Rockland County executive and a Republican. Welcome. Dominic Carter is here, political journalist and author. And Richard St. Paul is here. He is an attorney, a Republican strategist, and a former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association. So 2 Republicans on the panel. Fitting that we start on the Republican side of the ledger today. Let's start with the CARSON Trump endorsement. Does that help Trump? I assume it does a little bit. I'm going to start with you, Richard.
It doesn't hurt Trump, and it's certainly helpful. But again, endorsements these days only go but so far, especially in this type of election. I'm talking about Republican primary in particular. You have endorsements of other candidates. Doesn't particularly weigh in. If people are angry and they're upset at government, and that's really what's driving it, not endorsements.
Although Ben Carson was something of a sober voice on the Republican side of the ledger earlier on in this campaign season, that might add a little credence or a little credibility to voters who might be on the fence about Trump.
I think you may be right, and he does have an evangelical following, and he has been, the class kind of guy. And for him to stand up, which he did today, and say, look, the Trump you see in these debates is not the real Trump all the time. He can be serious and cerebral. Now that's something that no one has really said. And now the question, of course, is what's he going to get for it? It seems to me when you've been called all the things that Trump called him, he's had to get something. Yeah.
But a serious. We're saying Carson is serious and cerebral, or Trump?
The Trump was. That was one of the things he said.
I need you to say it one more time because it's so hard to believe.
Well, and coming from him, because he called. He really was being called names just like the others.
But Dominic, if you're a basketball team that gets to the NBA Finals based on 3-point shots, and then you get to the finals and you start playing an inside game, you're supposed to go with the strategy that brought you there, right? Why is Trump switching all of a sudden?
Well, he's not stupid. He knows he couldn't do the carnival routine the entire campaign. Once remember, there were how many Republican candidates? 15? 17 that started out. And so he's a master at throwing flames, getting the headlines, dominating the news cycle. And so now he needs to appear, if it's possible, to say in the same breath with his name, presidential, and start moving towards the middle and showing that it can be more measured, more reasoned. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to last very long. Look at his double down recently with the Muslim comment. It's disgusting.
The other thing that helps here is that when Trump started talking about, consolidating the leadership into one person and him. So when you start having a former candidate like Chris Christie endorse him, and then Ben Carson endorse him and says, let's coalesce into one candidate so that we can beat Hillary Clinton. That helps his tagline.
Well, let me drill down on that a little bit, because you're a Republican. Donald Trump looks like he's going to be the nominee of the Republican Party. You're going to vote for Donald Trump? You're going to support Donald Trump?
Well, we have an opportunity April 19th to vote for him in New York State.
If it's Trump versus Hillary on the November ballot.
Look, I never say who I'm going to vote for, but I would say this. Right now, if the election was held tomorrow, Donald Trump would lose to Hillary Clinton, whereas a Mark Rubio, a John Kasich, even a Ted Cruz have a better chance of beating Hillary.
Would you seriously consider voting for Donald Trump if he's up against Hillary Clinton?
I reserve my
That
right.
sounds like a no to me. Scott, you're a
reserve.
5-term executive of Rockland County Republican. If it's Trump versus Hillary, you voting for Trump?
Well, they have a place for me in Ottawa where I'm going to be going directly from this country, so I don't have to. No, I don't. You know what? I will tell you honestly, I was impressed with the fact, not with what he said, but the fact that he held back. Now, it may be the last 2 minutes of the basketball game, you know, when he puts the second and third string in, figuring he's won the game. But I thought Trump sounded, even though I thought some of his comments were nonsense, he sounded certainly a lot more level-headed. So I think, honestly, I'll have to, and I'm very worried about Hillary Clinton's background and this whole question of the emails. I don't think that's going away, despite the fact she wishes it would.
You know, one of the many things that has worried me about the Trump campaign so far, I mean, the lack of specificity and the fact that he seems to be something of a huckster with the steaks and the wine and all that, this violence that we're seeing at the Trump rallies, I find it incredibly dispiriting and discouraging, and we're seeing it more and more. And I'm curious what your thoughts. Every campaign winds up getting protests. He's the only one who's got this level of protest, but then also got people in the crowd taking swings at these people as they're being let out.
Well, and I think the tone set by the leadership. I think when you had Chris Christie and Bridgegate, I don't think it was a coincidence that the people who worked with him thought it was okay to shut down the bridge. And I think that starts at the top with the type of leader. If you're a bully, then I think people think it's okay to be a bully also. When you look at the Trump speeches, and he's like, you know, this person's get him out of here.
Get him out of here. Get him out.
And you know, people, that type of vibe says, you know, look, we don't have to tolerate anything. If people are doing something wrong, we take action into our own hands. And I think the tone is set from the top.
Well, and he did it directly. Take him out, punch him. You know, he would say that from
he did say
the
if
podium.
it was the old days, I would, you know, we deal with people like that. We would punch them. He did say that. Yeah, I mean.
And so he backed way down last night. I mean, if you listen to him, well, and particularly, and they didn't bring it up about the reporter who was thrown to the ground. I mean, I mean, in addition to the protests, yeah.
But he did back off and say, hey, you know, I don't condone any violence at my rallies.
But at the same time, he says these people love America and there's a lot of anger out there. I mean, it's a head nod towards contrition on this, but then he sort of gives voice to the people and gives them the latitude, it seems, to go ahead and do this. He's certainly not dismissing this. He's not, you know, he's not saying not to do it.
But it's the same. It's the same way in his, you know, his slow roll into, you know, rebuking David Duke and the Ku Klux Klan. It was, you know, a day later before we hear, well, I don't want David Duke to support me, who was a former Klan member, and I don't, you know, support the KKK. It was a slow roll before he talked about, you know, backing off those.
Yeah, but this guy, and this is one of the reasons why we have such trouble, he divides people. I mean, the whole Muslim issue, I mean, that whole issue came up, and again last night he doubled down. I don't think he understands. I don't think he understands Saudi Arabia or Jordan or any of the issues that deal with
certainly
Muslim
didn't understand Cuba from last night's debate. I mean, he was so off on his policy specifics.
No, and that's what, you know, that's when you start asking who you're going to vote for. The guy does not understand this stuff. Even if you get by the bully and the rancor and the whole circus-like atmosphere, he doesn't understand fundamentals, and he creates division among people. And that's dangerous for the country. I really think it is.
He still has a lot of high negatives, very high negatives.
We are entering uncharted waters. And as I said all along, sleep on Trump all you want to. Once you become the nominee for the party, they need 1257 delegates, 1252, and it's still a tall order because if Kasich wins Ohio, you know, it'll be tough for him to get there. But once you become the nominee for the party, you're only a heartbeat away from the presidency. Let's say, for hypothetical or argument's sake, Hillary's indicted. Hillary falls and stumbles in a big way. Trump cruises to election. Donald Trump as president of the United States. I want you to think about that for a second.
I'd rather not.
I mean, how scary it could actually be. And so, you know, I thought it was cute. I thought it was funny, his campaign. It was a big joke to me. But I'm not laughing now. It really, and the way that young lady was treated in that rally.
The journalist?
No, referring to the African-American young lady being pushed by, I don't know if I should say farmers They look like rural type workers.
Well, the guy,
and they don't see anything wrong with what they're doing.
The guy in the red hat behind her, who has been identified as a white supremacist, and there was also a guy in what looks to be a VFW outfit that's also shoving her out of the way.
And I mean, and I'm going to say it, you know, she's one African American dot in that crowd. Mm-hmm. How do you think she feels? Look, you got a veteran. Look at what he's doing to her right now.
Yeah.
And Trump is up on stage doing a wink, wink, and a nod, nod, encouraging the entire thing.
And again, it certainly starts with the leadership, starts with the tone. But when you have a presidential candidate saying, "Get this person out of here," we have not seen that in American politics, and I can't tell you how long. Most people will say, "You know what? Quiet down. Okay, you had your say.
Right.
Okay." But nobody says, I haven't heard any presidential, modern day president say, or candidate say, "Get him out of here."
The people who I've seen ejected and treated like this are either black, or I think there was one guy who was Sikh at one of the rallies who was also similarly escorted. And there's an old saying about, you know, at some point there's no difference between being a racist and simply putting up with racism. They're essentially the same thing. We're getting into a dangerous territory at these rallies that's not just angry voters. There's a racial element here too.
No, and we've seen this historically when you have that nationalistic tone, "Make America great again. We're better than everybody." You know, that type of tone is the same type of tone you can say what happened in Germany, where is, you know, we have to take our country back. You know, we're better than everybody else. That's very divisive and very dangerous and hard to backtrack from.
Okay. But this is the guy who is positioning himself to become the leader of your party, and Scott, the leader of your party.
And there's a lot of dissension among Republicans about him, you know, leading here. But there are a lot of people who, the most active and vocal people in the party, are coming out and supporting him. The Republican Party, again, may be to blame for the way they've handled things and the lack of leadership over the years. Why Donald Trump can come in here and do that.
Trump thinks this is a game as far as the protesters. Mm-hmm. His thing is, look, the rappers love me. All the rappers love me. And that may be true. That may be true. But what he's missing in all of this, and he's not really missing it because he's smart.
Sure.
You're riling up that 10% that's very, very dangerous.
Scott, I'll give you the last word.
Well, he's dangerous in this respect also. He's off the cuff, okay? So all Mexicans are all bad. All Muslims are all bad. Anybody who protests, he said this last night, they're bad people, you know. They're bad people. I mean, they're part of a democracy where this is allowed, and he does create that division, and because he does this without thinking, and I'm afraid, however cerebral he is, you know, he's off the cuff, and that in an international that we live in, the kind of international affairs, is extremely dangerous.
Oh, yeah. I'm just not convinced that he's not thinking about it. I think he has an idea. This is the least I can do that still encourages these people, keeps them angry, but gives me enough plausible deniability that nobody can look at me and say that I'm solely to blame. And I get the last word. Up next, the battle over appointing a Supreme Court nominee to replace Justice Scalia continues, but there could be a crack in the Republican blockade, and it's a big one.